The Dallas Cowboys have contract extensions to sort out with Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons. So we're going to show you exactly how they can get it all done today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
So happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Deadpool and Wolverine release day to you.
Are those two movies or one?
Dude, this has been the most obnoxious brand campaign of the year. The yellow guy and the red guy, superhero. Surely you've seen a billboard or a
not one, not
programmatic advertisement or
not a single
tweet.
one. No,
yeah, it's a comic book movie. So,
but it's one. It's called Deadpool.
Comic. It's got Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman in it. Wolverine from the X-Men.
Yeah, star power.
Yeah,
This would be a big one.
So Hugh Jackman retired from playing Wolverine like 10 years ago and came back for this movie because him and Ryan Reynolds are buddies.
Wow.
So that's why it's
really special. You going to see it? Is this go to the theaters to watch this one?
We'll see if I catch a rainy day down here. If I do,
like if you could, like if you there's a piece of you that wants to go see this movie.
I want to see the movie. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how bad. I don't know if I want to spend $40 to go sit in a theater by myself and see the movie. But
I did it one time. I went to the movies by myself one time, and I really enjoyed it. Wasn't bad.
Especially if you go during that daytime window, right? And nobody's.
Yeah, I mean, this was I was in college. It was a long time ago, but I did it, and I.
What movie?
I don't want to say. I'll tell you. I'm not, dude. I'm not saying it out loud. But I will tell you.
I did a solo movie trip one time. I went and saw like when they did. It was not that long ago. When not the new Godzilla with King Kong and not the one where he fought King Kong, but like just Godzilla, King of the Monsters came out. Yeah. I went and saw that one. I used to love Godzilla movies as a kid. Yeah.
I've never heard you talk about this. I know you're a big
I used to have all the action figures. The Mecha Godzilla one was my favorite one. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So when like the one that kind of reset the cinematic universe but was like had like Bryan Cranston in it. That's the one I went and saw in theaters. This is a good movie. She was like, "Who's Bryan Cranston?" Anyway, let's talk.
I don't know. I don't know who he is. So I'm sure he's a great guy.
We talked about him. He's the guy that's Breaking Bad.
He's the lead guy.
Yeah, the guy from the Breaking Bad TV show he's has a role in the. Go ahead, Google him. You're gonna be like, "Oh, Breaking Bad, of course. Now I know what that is. That bald guy."
Oh, it's this guy. Yeah. I know this guy. But that's not how I associate this guy right here. With not okay. What do I associate this guy with?
Bryan Cranston. Oh, he's the dad from.
that's exactly what he's in.
Sitcom with like Freddie or Frankie Muniz.
Oh, what is it?
Malcolm in the Middle.
That's definitely not it. That's definitely not it. What is he famous? I recognize his face.
Breaking Bad. He's famous from Breaking Bad.
Yeah, imagine that. Thinking that is his name Frank in that show? Is that what this is?
Dude, start teeing up the Cowboys conversation. Let me do the
God.
research. There's no 0% chance you're going to find out.
There's some show. I think my wife watches it. This guy's name's Frank. He's a real weirdo. In some show that she's watching from time to time. Oh God. Yeah, please God, let us talk about the Dallas Cowboys. This is not going to end well. Dallas Cowboys, they're in the headlines right now. They got some contracts to figure out. Pretty big time players. Dak Prescott, Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb. We got to figure this out. And Kyle and I, our objective today is to show you how they can get this done. You know, Jerry Jones, I know that he thinks he's Patrick Mahomes and, you know, he's got the option and he's going to push it to the sideline, make some last-minute decisions. We're going to make this real simple on how the Dallas Cowboys can get all of this done here today on this Friday episode of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You're going to have to ask your wife what show she watches. So let's start with Dallas's salary cap situation. I think the first thing to acknowledge is you look at this team and it's kind of like LA Rams less need structured right now, right? Where you look at like the haves and the have-nots of the contracts. And what I mean by that is you talked about the Rams roster construction when Les Snead was at the peak of his F them picks status, and that's not what Dallas has done, but there's stars and scrubs on the roster from like an investment standpoint. And you have really big cap hits, and then you have really small cap hits. And the volume of really small cap hits fill in the rest of the roster around the guys that you have identified are your pillar players that you build around. I think what makes this challenging for Dallas is reconciling that's your current roster and cap distribution. Two of the three guys that are your biggest pillar players are players on rookie contracts, and your three biggest pillar players are the three players that are in the middle of these contract negotiations. So it does open the door for you as a team to make the decision to go down path A or go down path B. Path A being invest in these players, continue to have these guys be the central focal points of your team. And path B is make some difficult transitions to maybe have your cash and cap distribution be a little bit more even spread across more of like a middle class of your roster.
Yeah, I think that part of that would be nice. But I'll say
they can still do some of that with like Zack Martin and Demarcus Lawrence.
Yeah.
And when those contracts come up, those contracts go.
Right. One thing that I'd like to establish in the early portions of this conversation is that I think you got to get it done with CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons. I mean, these are two of the bright young stars in the NFL at premium positions. I mean, CeeDee Lamb, unbelievable production and value at a big-time impact spot at wide receiver. Micah Parsons, an unbelievable pass rusher. Like, there's no path forward for me where those guys aren't locked up, taken care of, part of our entire team building philosophy moving forward. Those are our young cornerstones that there's no chance that I'm not taking care of. So that's the priority for me. And so,
yeah, and it should be, right? Because there's less hoops to clear to get those contracts, new contracts on the books without kind of the past credit card debt, so to speak, of like Dak. Dak's contract is currently scheduled for $40 million in void money next year if he's not on the team. And this year, his $55 million cap hit, and he's getting only about $30 million in cash. The other $25 million is stuff from his signing bonus and his contract restructures that's already been restructured in years past that you prorated out through the maximum duration of time that you're able to do that. So that's where Dallas, by extending Dak Prescott now, could certainly free up some cap space, but it's almost 50% of a $55 million cap hit is money that they paid in past years that they're going to owe. And it's like that next year for both the signing bonus and the contract restructures that he did in season.
And part of the bad news here, I have bad news and good news. The bad news is that there's credit card debt coming up for Zack Martin and Demarcus Lawrence as expiring contracts that you feel like, oh, those will be off the books. That's going to help us. Well, not really, because you have you've restructured those deals in such ways that put some healthy void years at the end of them. Now, the good news is that when we do talk about the extension for CeeDee Lamb, he's playing this year on the 5th-year option of $17.9 million, which gives us a ton of flexibility for the new deal. Then also with Micah Parsons, he's got 2 years left. He's got his 4th season plus his 5th-year option. And so our big cap hits for him, we can stagger out a little bit. And so I think those are important details to be mindful of as we plot the path forward for the Dallas Cowboys to be able to get all of these contracts taken care of.
Yeah.
So that
some good thoughts there about kind of the runways of those contracts. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but I just want to make a point so that you remember to remind me to talk about the runways of the deals.
All right. We're talking
talking
runways. We're talking about what exactly those contracts will look like for Dak, CeeDee, and Parsons here on the other side of it. Be sure to stick with us. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Okay. So do you want to start with Dak? Do you want to finish with Dak?
Let's start with Dak, and here's your reminder about the runways that we finished the last segment with.
Yeah, so Dak's contract is a little bit more complicated because of the prorated money that's already happened. But with these contracts, these mega contracts, the first 3 years are usually pretty digestible. Whether you choose to structure it with roster options, which is like a roster bonus, but you can prorate a roster option out like you would a signing bonus. So your first 3 years, whatever your initial signing bonus is, and then if you prorate out the majority of the salary the next couple seasons, like those numbers still don't get too big. So as you talking about Zack Martin and you talking about Demarcus Lawrence, if you need to take your medicine to get those guys off the books, doing so in 2025 or 2026 is not going to be particularly cost prohibitive to have a big cap hit there, because even though you have the big contracts with the other guys, the young guys on the rookie contracts and CeeDee and Micah Parsons, their big cap hit years don't come yet. Like if CeeDee Lamb signed a big contract right now, I bet you his first big cap hit season would be 2027 or 2028. And that's kind of where, like, when Dak signed his contract, his big cap hit years are in 2022 and 2023, right? Like that's how that, if you don't operate to some degree with that willingness to borrow from future years, you're putting yourself at a competitive disadvantage versus the league and trying to compete, because there's teams like Philadelphia and Cleveland that have completely said every dollar that we can borrow from future years, we're going to borrow to maximize our roster. You have teams like the Saints that say, we want to restructure every contract and squeeze as much blood from this stone as we possibly can with this nucleus of this team. If you don't do that, if you are, this is another one of those things like what we did the paying the quarterbacks conversation. This isn't a social experiment, right? Like whatever your individual belief is, you're borrowing against future cap hits where there is inflation of the salary cap, where $1 today is $1 from tomorrow is cheaper today than it will be tomorrow, if that makes sense, because the cap goes up about 7 or 8% every single year on average in the last collective bargaining agreement window. And that included a global pandemic. So, and there's no interest on that as well. So that's why teams borrow, and teams are now pushing the limits of what they are able to borrow, because a team like Philadelphia can say, well, we'll borrow everything that we can from 2026 to get this roster locked in as long as we can. And then in 2026, we're going to borrow from 2029 when the cap has continued to go up another 30% over a 3-year sample size. So that's the big soapbox moment that I felt was appropriate to have here in talking about these contracts and how they work and the windows in which they actually influence your salary cap.
And Dallas next year right now staring at about, $65 million in available cap space, which will be helpful in getting all of this done.
And it'll be more than that too. Because
right, that's a very conservative estimate.
For the websites that are doing that are using a $260 million cap forecast. The cap this year is 255. Like, it's going to be probably 270 or more.
Which is going to be better news for everybody, including the Dallas Cowboys.
Correct.
Dak Prescott, we got to get a contract extension done here. The top of market is Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, $55 million APY. I think most of the recent contracts for quarterbacks have been 5-year deals, except for the ones that are a little bit older. And I think that Dak fits into that bucket of a little bit older. He's 31 years old. So I think this is a 4-year deal. And I think we reset the APY at $56 million. So 4 years at $56 million APY, that's $224 million.
Is Dak going to sign that deal with Dallas right now?
I know the rumors out there said he wants $60 million per.
So if you're Dallas and you give an offer to Dak that he decides he's going to have to take, I do think you proactively have to bid against the open market a little bit.
Okay, where are you going to go? 57?
I'd offer him 60 if I want him to sign. I can see how for those of you who are not watching YouTube, Joe is physically uncomfortable at the idea. But what other incentive does Dak have to sign? He came out yesterday and said, if you watch all the great quarterbacks, they end up playing their careers somewhere else. I want to be in Dallas, but if that's how it's going to have to be, that's how it's going to be.
I understand Dak's point there, and especially how things have been goofy with this contract. And there's probably a moment where he's just like, can we just do this, get this done the right way?
And he knows he can't be tagged.
I think there's a big difference between he leaves and signs for $60 million APY and everyone puts their palms there and say, oh, okay, he did it. But then you just go ahead and do it. I think the point being, here's the most important takeaway as you and I debate this. They can. If that's what they want to do to get this done,
right.
They can.
I think that's what they would have to do to get it done. Like, I'm not sitting here saying give Dak Prescott the moon. But I'm saying with Dak having the leverage that he does, knowing how much, like, he's got a $40 million void cap hit against them. They can't franchise tag him. So he knows either you give me the offer that's going to get me to say yes, or I'm going to let it play out and I'm going to hit the open market as one of the more accomplished quarterbacks to hit free agency in some time, still in the prime of my career. And I'm going to let the salary cap that's rising at an 11% clip over the last 2 years or whatever that smaller average is, do the work for me, and I'm going to cash in big and choose where I want to go.
Okay, so 4 years, $60 million a season, and we guarantee $130 million of that, which is over 54% of his deal, which would make him the highest APY and one of the highest guarantees in the history of the game.
Yeah, I think that's a competitive offer that I think Dak would have to think about.
Okay.
But that's the right ballpark.
So that's Dak. CeeDee Lamb, his number one receiver. Off the charts, man. He's an absolute stud. And you and I kind of talked a little bit about this in the pre-show and felt like there was a landing spot between Justin Jefferson and A.J. Brown. Justin Jefferson, $35 million APY.
Mhm.
A.J. Brown, $32 million APY. 34 per. Does that get this done? I'm sure CD thinks he should get 35. I'm sure CD would like to be the guy that says he's the highest paid wide receiver in the history of the game.
You can find other carrots to give as far as like percentage guaranteed or signing bonus or 3-year cash flow, however you want to do it. I think you can get CD an offer between those two numbers that is a more than acceptable offer that gives a PR win that they're going to be looking for. So, yeah, I think $34 million behind Justin Jefferson. I think that's a totally reasonable kind of expectation for a contract offer. And as you said, he's on the 5th-year option this year. If you get that one done, that cap hit this year can technically go down, and then you can theoretically carry that over into your 2025 window to help soften the blow of whatever other contracts you give out.
Which gets us to Micah Parsons. And the edge market's very interesting because Nick Bosa came over the top with a massive reset at $34 million APY. Even guys that just signed deals, Joshua Hines, Allen, and Brian Burns came in at a tick over 28. But like TJ Watt's at 28, Myles Garrett's at 25, but Bosa's at 34, and honestly that's the only thing that matters. I just said all that to say that Bosa reset the market in a significant way, and that puts us in a spot with Parsons where we got to beat it. We got to pay him more than Bosa. I think he comes in at 35.
Yeah, I agree. I think his versatility is his best friend there too, right? All the different ways that you can use him as compared to just being kind of a central piece on the line that plays in one spot. The fact that you could do so many different things with him gives him, I think, leverage to really align and aim for that top of market distinction.
So those are the contracts that we envision for these three players to get them to stay in Dallas. On the other side of it, we'll talk about future cap, making it all fit. So be sure to stick with us. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours, and over 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
So there's a few things that I think Dallas can kind of proactively do next offseason too, to make sure that they are in as healthy of a window to start to accommodate these contracts. We talked about Demarcus Lawrence, I think maybe being a player that you let walk as a result of the impending big contracts that are coming in for you. But Terrence Steele at tackle, they made the investment in Tyler Guyton. They have Tyler Smith who can play tackle. I would probably part ways with Terrence Steele after this upcoming season. You could save $8 million against the cap in doing that. And that's not enough to cover any one of these big three individual contracts. It might be enough to cover Micah Parsons' cap hit in the first year if you give him the contract extension, because it's technically his 4th year this year, his 5th year next year. Those cap numbers don't go crazy. I know like Jalen Waddle, as an example, in the same draft class, just signed his contract extension with Miami this offseason. And his 2025 hit is like $9 million. And he signed a $28 million per year contract extension. So it at least a move like that, as simple as it is, can get you into the ballpark in the early years of the contracts for these guys that are on rookie contracts signing these big extensions, to cover most of your bases in that regard. That's another move I would make if I were Dallas.
Yeah, I think those are good steps to help us. But there's going to be an onus on a couple of things like player development and hitting on draft picks, right? Like that's as your roster becomes more expensive, like that's what you have to be able to do. And so as you say goodbye to a Demarcus Lawrence, it's like, okay, let's go. We need
Sam Williams development.
Marshawn Nealon to be the player they drafted him to be. And okay, well, we might have to make some concessions on the O line. Okay, Cooper Beebe, let's go. Like you got to be a thing. Mozzie Smith got to be a thing here for us. And then on top of that, it's like, okay, we got to continue to draft, and the value of significant contributions from players on rookie deals needs to be a thing for the Dallas Cowboys. But as we've identified star power, I mean, that's just the name of the game. And so drafting, developing, that's where the onus, I mean, that's the one thing that I would say, no matter where you are in your life cycle, whether you're a rebuilding team, a team in transition, a contending team, whatever you are, being able to draft and develop players matters at every interval of life cycles across the NFL.
It's the sustainability of whatever you're trying to do, right? Whether you're a team that has a bunch of stars that are late stage players and you want to ride that out into kind of the next chapter without having to go all the way back to square one, you got to have a really deep pool. You have a large influx as a rebuilding team, and you kind of transition into a young contender. And some of those guys reach the end of their rookie contracts and they got to go. Well, do you want to have to overspend in free agency to get replacements that aren't as good as the players that left, but you still overpay? Or do you want to have guys that were in the pipeline that you drafted a year or two in advance that are ready to step in and give comparable or at least much more cost-effective solutions to those vacancies on the roster? Like it's top to bottom. And I think that's something that Dallas has working in their advantage when you consider how well regarded Will McClay is for what he does running, a lot of what they do in that regard. And they have had a lot of success stories of draft and development type of players too.
100%.
In recent years. I think you look at Dallas and the guys that they've drafted at all different spots across the league, like whether that's Tyler Smith, whether that's Daron Bland, whether that's you consider even the development of like a free agency guy like Malik Hooker and what he's become, or Jaron Curse, who's no longer with the team, but the development of those kinds of guys, it's there. And it will have to kick it into a high gear as you have this transition of guys who have been pillars and they phase themselves out, and you take your medicine to clear whatever prorated money's on those books, and your new guys have their big contracts that start to phase in and overlap. And that's not going to leave a lot of extra wiggle room probably for like 2025. But then in like 2027, 2028, once these big contracts start to balloon a little bit, that's when you'll get back into a window where, hey, we have to make some hard decisions on who to keep and who to not. Let's make sure we're drafting really well and getting guys at premium positions that can give some good contributions for you.
And I think a good story to tell here about should all this go down the way we've kind of mapped it out, you're tying up money in the right places. I mean, we're talking about a young elite receiver, a young elite pass rusher. You've got a bunch of money tied up in Trevon Diggs, who's a young corner that takes away the football, a top 10 quarterback, right? So, I mean, top 8 probably. That's where you want your big money to go up. Top 6, Kyle's pointing up. He's good. And so I think that's healthy, where in the past maybe you looked at Dallas and said, man, we got money tied up in guards and
linebackers, running backs.
Right. You know what I mean? Like this is a healthier outlook for Dallas. And I know that there's a lot of urgency for them to be successful, and they have been successful, but to go on deeper runs, I think this positions you well for things to kind of stabilize and normalize and extend your window, I think, significantly. And I would feel comfortable with that 4-year extension with Dak to realize that, hey, we do have the top end talent to be a contending team. Let's fill in the blanks.
Yep, for sure. That is where Dallas stands, and what they actually do, we shall see. But they are one of the more fascinating long-term teams because of the presence of Dak Prescott and these guys that have made it very well known that they are looking for new deals and high compensation that matches where they're at as players at this stage in their young careers. So we'll see what happens with Dallas on that front, but don't let them lie to you and tell you that they can't pull it off, because they can. It's just a question of what they choose to do. Joe's taking a timeout.
It's not really a timeout. I just want to make sure I get a word in before we're done.
Go ahead.
So did you finish your thought?
Yeah.
I know for everyone that stuck around to the end, I want everyone to know that I was confusing the Bryan Cranston guy with William H. Macy. And whether that's right or wrong, that's who I was getting my wires crossed with. Thanks for being here. Have a great day.